want to thank everybody for your patience. We have had very packed agendas on our meetings prior to this one, and really appreciate your patience. And I'm glad that you're joining us. Sometimes these meetings get a little lonely, and it's always nice to have extra people in the room, so thanks for coming out. I want to start with our introductions. We always just let you know who's here with us. We have Joanna Vines, who is our student representative, and Andrea McMenamin is our teacher representative. On our committee is Susan Stern. Chuck Fadden's on the committee, but not sure where he went. I'm Amy Goldman. This is Dr. Babson, who is on our committee. Mr. Batchelor should be back. We have our solicitor, Mike Christopko, with us. And our administrative liaison to this committee is Dr. Tony Robarczyk. And I mentioned him last because that is our segue into his administrative remarks.
Good evening, everyone. So we're going to go right into the questions from our last meeting, which the first one was, there are more suggestions than questions, but it was suggested the district needed a policy for the privacy of all data collected about students to be used for educational purposes. So basically what I want to do is cover how the district takes its approach in assuring that this occurs. So the district will take the suggestion into further consideration once we're doing a review of related policies. But in the meantime, the safeguards that are currently in place include maintaining compliance with Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, of 1974, where it gives parents access to the children's educational records and opportunities to seek and have records amended and some control of their disclosure of information. We also comply with what's called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is the COPA law of 1998. And this is a law that protects privacy of children.
Excuse me, Dr. Robarczyk, I am so sorry to interrupt. I am so sensitive to our time constraints.
Okay.
May I request that the chair defer some of this to next month? We've had people waiting 45 minutes, and so it's a really long and comprehensive, and I really appreciate it. We should answer these at a later time.
That's fine.
That's just my thought. It's my request, seeing everybody in the audience. Mrs. Goldman, could you defer it or let's see how the rest of the meeting goes. Maybe we can talk about this at the end of the meeting.
Okay, we'll put those on hold for the moment and the administrative remarks, although some of them speak to some of the board business that we have in front of us. So if there's anything, Dr. Robarczyk, that you want to mention
Pertinent to tonight, yeah.
With regard to that, but I do think we need to make sure that at some point we address the things that you said previously.
Yeah, just to clarify that one, then, just that there was a question whether the board reviews administrative regulations. I want to just make sure that people understand that the board doesn't approve or adopt accompanying administrative regulations to the policies, but they are presented to the policy for review. And so when the information is being posted to the website. With that said, we do have 3 policies that we're looking at bring back for second reads. Recommendation to take second read at this month's upcoming May regular business meeting. We're going to be talking about the Booster Club and providing a PowerPoint educational session to understand our development of the policy and why this is occurring. And then we also have the AR 903 communications that is taking the place of 3 policies that we are taking forward, policy 901, 902, and 911, that will be rescinded as a second read this coming month.
Okay, great. So sorry about that.
It's okay.
Let's move then into public comment. Is there any public comment this evening?
Good evening.
Good evening, Mrs. Fertile.
Is her mic on?
I'd like to give your...
Oh, it is?
Now you're on.
Now it is on. Cindy Spurgeon. Comment on the disappointment that the information that we haven't handed out tonight about the booster clubs was not posted as it was promised on Monday, and I understand things get delayed, but here we are, and with no chance to review the public comment on something very important, which I presume a lot of the people are here to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello, Sherry. Just to clarify again, it has been one of my initiatives to keep saying that Information on students collected on students should be used for education purposes only, and in particular, the fact that we refer students to go to different, not school district websites to find out about their sports information. I don't know if there's other areas we send them, but that's been a big concern because our policies don't appear to be covering areas where we send children to find information. And I too noticed that there was a PowerPoint on the Booster Club that was supposed to be posted May 7th, yesterday, and it was not online today. So when you read that, you're going back and forth trying to find it, and when it's not there, it's disappointing. The agenda, at the May 1st Finance Committee meeting, the district responded to my question, will someone from the administration or the school board give an explanation as to why the district's athletic opportunities disclosure reports from 16-17 and 15-16 indicate that the football booster club contributed $0 toward purchases for football. The response from the district was that reporting booster contributions was voluntary. That led me to review the district's athletic opportunities disclosure reports, and I found that every other boys and girls high school varsity sport, I didn't go through the whole thing, reported booster club contributions with one exception, football. Football was the only varsity sport. Now, indoor track, outdoor track looked like to me that track must collect because one time it would be 0 and one time the other one would be 0. So, but I assume that they were collecting for track. But football was the only one that didn't disclose. Why wouldn't football boosters report finances after Ms. Decal repeatedly asked for this information? Possibilities. Were they embarrassed because they raised too little? Or did they want to hide the fact that they collected a huge amount of money? Or did they lose track of income and expenditures because of poor accounting practices? Reporting this information is clearly tied to Title IX issues of fair funding of sports, even though the law may still include it on a voluntary basis. How can this lack of response be permitted to continue if the district values being transparent, responsible, and accountable to parents, kids, and contributors? Isn't this a similar issue to the lack of transparency with the theater accounting practices? So I'm hoping that the board, and will they, make this part of the issue that's addressed during tonight's meeting, because I see that we're focusing on booster clubs. And just as an aside, reviewing those forms showed that the varsity football total annual school team expenditure went from $29,000 in 15-16 to $41,000 in 16-17, and salaries went from $22,000 to $32,000 in 16-17, and I wondered what the explanation for that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment this evening?
It's on, okay.
Yep.
I'm Lauren Williams, 211 Atlee Road.
Amy Schwartz, 54 Wentworth Lane.
First of all, I would like to thank the board for the time and attention put toward the discussion and adoption of a resolution at the April 2018 board business meeting stating that regardless of any legislation that would allow for the arming of school personnel other than trained law enforcement officers in our schools here in Pennsylvania, our school board here in Radnor will not allow any school personnel other than trained law enforcement officers to be armed in our district. And moreover, that we won't knowingly send our students to districts where the teachers or school personnel are permitted to be armed. We believe this is an important step toward keeping our students safe, and we're very appreciative of the work you have put in toward that end and for listening to our concerns as parents and citizens. Following up on that, I've printed copies of our district's current school safety policy, Policy 705, which was drafted in 2008. Speaking on behalf of ourselves and a group of parents from the Radnor Network to Prevent Gun Violence, we heard some board members mention during the April board business meeting that this resolution should be incorporated into our district policy. We agree and believe that Policy 705 needs to be updated to include safety and security concerns and the changed landscape in the 10 years since it was written, as well as to include recognition of this new resolution. We propose updating the title and content to incorporate the word security in addition to safety, including staff in addition to students in the language within section number 3 where it does not exist. For example, ensure curriculum to instruct students and staff in safety. security and fire prevention and provide required drills to instruct students and staff in safety procedures, including language that addresses the types of drills we now conduct for active shooter situations and incorporating language relating to the resolution to not arm teachers or send our students to districts where teachers or school personnel are known to be armed.
Thank you very much, and that was a quick read, and we appreciate your recognition of the time thing, but I think I saw the fingers slow down over there, so maybe Patty Calderoni could benefit from getting that in an email or something, or maybe send that to us, because there was a lot of good information in there that was hard to capture.
No, it was great, thank you.
So, thank you very much for all of that. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, approval of minutes from last time. Is everybody on board with the minutes?
Look great.
Terrific. All right, first agenda item is policy 250, student recruitment. This policy was approved at our April business meeting for a first reading. It's our job now to pass it on, hopefully, to the board at our May business meeting for second read and adoption. And if there's is there anything that...
There were no changes made between the first reading and the presentation of this policy tonight.
So does anybody on our committee have any comments, or are we ready to recommend that it go for a second reading?
Good to me.
Okay, terrific. Let it be known that 250 is on its way for a second reading at the May business meeting. All right, policy 302, employment of superintendent, assistant superintendent. Again, same thing. We approved it as a first reading, and we'd like to move it for a second reading and adoption in May. Dr. Rabarchak?
So for policy 302, the only change was under authority, the third paragraph was broken into two separate paragraphs. Where it's broken, if the board fails to take such action, where it was separated. And we also took out that in that previous sentence, as you can see, in the case of an assistant superintendent, such notification may, it was crossed out the intent, instead notify the assistant superintendent that, and included the words also that.
Whoa. Which, I've lost you. Where are you?
So on the first page,
Yes.
third paragraph down
Yes.
under the authority,
Yes.
where it is broken to, the first sentence of the new paragraph of the fourth paragraph is, if the board fails
Right.
to take such action.
Yes.
So if you go up in the third paragraph, the last sentence, am I right, the last sentence? There was a red line of, in the case of an assistant superintendent, such notification may, and the words instead
Oh,
notify.
yep, I see it. Yep.
And it was
Okay.
added, also include that.
Yep,
before.
sure.
And then you can see the minor change in verbiage down below upon conclusion, and this was taken out and added the above.
Yep, but so that there's a little misread in the above. Read the sentence. The notification required the above paragraph. I think you should say in the above paragraph.
I would agree.
What do you think? Yeah. We'll make that note.
In the above.
Prior to going to the
Big
regular
circle,
business meeting.
and
Yep.
we'll fix that.
Yep.
Does anybody have any other concerns,
But
questions?
there were no other changes in reading
Yes.
to the policy.
I have a minor comma, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Did you say comma or comment?
Minor comma.
Minor comma? Okay. You can just give those
Yep.
commas right over to Dr. Rabarchak over there.
With a major comma.
Major, minor, I have,
Okay.
I got.
All right, terrific. So then let it be known that we are good with moving policy 302 to the full board in May for a second reading and adoption. Item 4.3, policy 610, purchases subject to bid and quotation. Let me just point this out too. Remember that we are changing the title when you see it in May. It's been proposed to be changed to the title of procurement to reflect the scope of this policy. And perhaps we should have mentioned that for policy 250, that title will be changed as well to reflect its full scope and the groups upon whom that impacts. So with that, policy 610 has not changed since the first reading, so we'd like to move it forward for a second reading at the business meeting in May. Do we have consensus to make that recommendation? Yes?
Yes.
Student and teacher, all good? Okay, terrific. So let it be known, that one's coming to the full board for the May business meeting as well. Just a few more items of business, and that is that we have 3 policies that were read for their rescission, ultimate rescission. Those are policies 901, 902, and 911, all communications-oriented policies that can now be rescinded because we have a brand new comprehensive communications policy with a lengthy AR that incorporates all of these previous policies into it. So with the agreement of this committee, we would like to continue the process of moving towards rescission of these 3 policies. Do we have consensus for that, everybody?
Yep, good.
Yes, let it be known. That's coming towards the May business meeting as well.
It's nice to see we're dropping that.
Yes, exactly. The binders are getting a little smaller as they get bigger. Okay, terrific. So we've gotten that business out of the way, which moves us into item 4.5, which is the booster policy development educational session. And I don't know if you had any administrative remarks to make around this to set this up, but I would just like to say as chair of this committee that this is one of those things that represents some type of change to the way things have been done in our district potentially. And input from all impacted stakeholders is not only appreciated, but very necessary. And from what I understand, Mr. Bechtold and Mr. Friel have reached out pretty extensively to people who are concerned, and we greatly appreciate that outreach. And perhaps even more, the feedback that the booster clubs have been giving us, because it is because of your feedback that we have decided to change direction a little bit, because the feedback that was coming back to us seemed to indicate that there was a need to answer things that have to do with why, as opposed to how. And those are 2 very separate things. And thank you for your feedback, because we have dedicated what was going to be this session for all of us to see the draft that you've already seen. We would have been seeing it pretty much for the first time. We've decided to put that off till next month so that we can focus on the why. I think it's going to be tremendously educational for all of us, and we have had a number of administrators who have been working feverishly, including throughout the day yesterday, and even perhaps even into today, which is why it wasn't put up. Right. Because there have been a very dedicated and numerous team of people who are trying to get this educational piece to be as helpful as it can possibly be. So I want to give a shout out to those who are in the room, Mr. Bechtold, our high school principal, and Mrs. Deco, our business manager, and our attorney, Mr. Christofko, and of course Tony. We had our communications director in the room, we had our superintendent in the room, we had our athletic director in the room, and we did have one extra valuable person, which happened to be our superintendent for the day, this absolutely lovely 8-year-old who gave us some just invaluable feedback and guidance as we were going through this process. But just to let you know, thank you for your feedback, thank you for your attendance tonight, and without further ado, unless there are extra remarks that you'd like to lend for context, let's get started on the information session tonight.
Do we have this?
I believe are there copies over there, because we did.
I just want to make notes. Thank you.
And I'd like to invite Ms. Deco and Mr. Bechtold up to the table, so as we're going through the presentation, they could be as a resource in answering any questions you may have.
I don't know.
You can actually follow along on the screens, and for those of us who don't have the paper, I do too, but, you know, thank you.
No, Joanna, it's fine, we'll share.
We'll get them, yeah, we'll share.
Amy, you can have mine. I just can't take mine.
I can write on the screen, Jackie. Just please don't trip. Thank you.
Thank you.
That would be an unanticipated agenda item we don't need. Okay.
All right. So as we said, we wanted to provide an informational session to the community in regards to what is entailed in regards to the development of this policy. So with that said, we have 4 guiding principles that we are looking at, and that's recognizing and greatly appreciating the generous support of the district, the district students through activities by the booster clubs, that we're recognizing the booster clubs remain at the school level under the control of discretion and supervision of the district through designated administrators, coaches, and faculty advisors. that the district is commits to maintaining a strong collaborative working relationship with each of the booster groups, with the school board, and to enhance the district's educational goals, and that establishing the guidelines to ensure compliance with applicable laws and regulations to protect both boosters and the district from any liability. So the definition of a booster club in itself is referring to any organization comprised of parents or guardians, community members, or others who have chosen to support an athletic, curricular, or extracurricular district activity. We wanted to make sure as part of this definition there's an understanding of what is not a booster club. So we added the piece at the bottom here where it's a community-based youth organizations, PTOs, parent-teacher organizations, Radnor Township Parks and Recs, recreation youth programs are not considered district booster clubs because they do not support one particular district activity nor receive any financial benefits from the district. Here are a current list of the booster clubs, and we did asterisk this because there may be some that are missing from this list. When we were compiling this, Mr. Creel has a comprehensive list of all the athletic booster clubs, but we know that there are additions. We have band included in there, and we want to make sure that we seek out and make sure that there's not any that we are missing from our list as part of this. So what we want to do at this point is just provide an overview of what Title IX is. It's part of the Education Amendments Act of 1972, and it's the understanding that no person in the United States shall, based on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation or be denied the benefits of or subject to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And it's the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, that is ultimately responsible for the enforcement of Title IX. So who does Title IX apply? It applies to all educational institutions, both public and private, that are in receipt of federal funds. The Title IX is applied to, how it's applied to the athletics. Considered educational programs and activities. There are three basic parts to Title IX. There's the participation piece that requires that women and men be provided equitable opportunities. Scholarships requires that female and male student athletes receive athletic scholarship dollars proportional to the participation. And then other benefits. The equal treatment of female and male student athletes and provisions of equipment and supplies, scheduling of games, travel and daily allowance, access to tutoring, coaching, locker rooms, practice competitive facilities, medical and training facilities, housing and dining facilities, publicity and promotions, support services, and recruitment of student athletes. Does Title IX only apply to athletics? It does not. So that although the application of Title IX to athletics maybe gain the greatest public visibility, the law applies it to every aspect of education, including course offerings, counseling and counseling materials, financial assistance, student health, housing, marital and parental status for students, educational programs and activities, as well as employment. And does it benefit only girls and women? The Title IX benefits everyone, girls, boys, women, and men. The law requires educational institutions to maintain policies, practices, and programs that do not discriminate against anyone on the basis of gender. The elimination of discrimination against women and girls has received more attention because females historically have faced greater gender restrictions and barriers in the world of education. However, Title IX has benefited men and boys as well. Its continued effort to achieve educational equality has benefited all students by moving forward toward creation of a school environment where all students may learn and achieve the highest standards. I just want to note that the information from here is taking, a lot of this is taken directly from the NCAA Title IX frequently asked questions and that applies to all levels, both high school and college. So what does Title IX mean to booster clubs and RTSD? There are 3 points here that booster clubs and for district sports are sanctioned by Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association, must comply with Title IX. Federal law requires equity in athletics. The booster club for district sports that are non-sanctioned by PIAA, and the booster clubs of non-athletic district activities will fall under the Title IX umbrella. As a result, all booster clubs and the district activities with which they are associated must satisfy Title IX requirements. And again, as we indicated on that previous slide, it's more than just the athletics piece, and that's why it's encompassing all athletic and non-athletic activities. So the safeguards to help ensure compliance. It's strongly recommended the district legal counsel that booster clubs have the following safeguards in place to help ensure compliance with state and federal laws, as well as support best practices to avoid liability to boosters and or the district. So the safeguards, you have some of the things that would be part of that policy in the administrative regulations would be those bylaws. That would be the safeguard. The protection would be consistent protocols with reliable structure. Safeguards under fundraising and accounting protocols to protect the fiscal compliance piece. These safeguards for annual booster meeting minutes process for leadership. Again, that transparency and the inclusion component. The safeguard of booster liaisons to the district. The protection will be the district support and guidance of those booster clubs. And the dissolution process as a safeguard in understanding the protection and the benefits of the legacy of the funds that may be with that booster club organization at the time. So the next steps that we're taking in regards to the development of the booster club policy will be on the June 19, 2018 policy committee meeting. There will be a first review. It is not intended to go to the full board for a first read at that time. It's just for that's being said is a first initial view of the drafts that are being developed. The second review would occur in August at the August 21st meeting, and that would be the time where we would recommend the first reading that would go to the full board at the August 28th regular business meeting. The draft of the booster policy and AR presented again at the September meeting, and again then recommended for second reading and adoption at the September meeting in 2018. And then as we proceed to the fall, there will be a dissemination and implementation of the booster club policy with the guidance and support from the Radnor High School and the central administration staff. And we are, again, just like the sleep study, there are updates that are being posted to the RTSD website, and there's the address below that you can link to that will provide additional information as we move forward.
Thank you very much for that overview. I would at this point like to turn it over to committee members who might want to give some feedback at this point, and then I hope that if there are members of the public, they'll take advantage of public comment to let us know their thoughts on this. And so let me turn it over to Susan.
So, Tony, thank you for this, and I know Dan and Michelle, I know that you've all been working really hard, and Mike Friel as well, yeah, no, thank you. So, on the page about the definition of a booster club, I want to just clarify at this point, I put a note on my paper saying this is the proposed definition, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not the set in stone definition.
That's correct.
And then I really appreciate the distinction that you're making here about community-based youth organizations and other ones. I am going to take a little bit personal, I'm going to disagree personally with some of the stuff that's said in the second paragraph. Having been on the board for, coming up on 4.5, 5 years, and the policy committee the entire time, superintendent ago, Dr. Kelly, we actually kicked around a policy, I think it was 915. And it's about it was about district associated groups, and it had to do with, we have a variety of groups, volunteer organizations throughout the district that support our students. We've got the PTOs, we have the booster groups, we have PAGE, which is a group of parents who support, who focus on supporting gifted students. We have the special education group that just started. There's a STEM group. There's a lot of really active volunteer parents in our community. We are so blessed that way. And so we had conversations. It didn't go anywhere at the time about what is the way for the school district to provide structure so that all these various groups could have a consistent expectation of the type of support that they could expect from the district. So, for instance, our PTO groups generally meet at our schools, and we don't charge them facility fees. They hold their, events at the schools, obviously. Our district, cleans up after events, which is the reason that I would say that our PTO does receive financial benefit, because when our staff goes in and cleans up after a PTO event, that's a financial benefit. Now, I don't have a problem with that, I'm just saying, so I want to just say that this page for me is proposed. This is draft conversation.
Susan, I know you have a comment, may I just
Sure.
lend something to your comment? And that is that just please, I think, read this as there are two conditions that need to be satisfied. You might be doing that, but it's not either or. Based on my understanding of the conversation, is that both conditions that these organizations do not support one specific district activity,
Yeah.
like lacrosse or theater
Yeah.
or whatever,
Right.
nor do they receive.
I know, that's what I
Okay,
disagree
okay,
with.
Okay, just wanted
That
to make
is-
sure. I just wanted to make sure. You can.
Yeah, no,
You're
I
welcome
mean,
to disagree, but it was a bit confusing initially.
I would have said, or they don't receive financial benefit from the district, not nor. Nor means both, or it could mean either. So that, it's a wording thing, it's not a big
Okay.
deal. My point is that at the time that we had this conversation, 2.5, 3 years ago, Mike Keller's been gone a couple of years, you've been here 10, so. Mike's been gone at least 2 or 3. My point is that at the time, I personally felt strongly that booster clubs needed to be part of that conversation. So this is going back 2.5 or 3 years ago, because I thought that they are a group of volunteers who provide very, the tennis booster club wouldn't exist if Radnor didn't have a tennis team. The Radnor football boosters wouldn't exist if Radnor didn't have a football team. The booster groups that exist because we have specific groups at our school, whereas the Page group actually could exist in our community even if we didn't have gifted students, because there could be a group of Radnor parents, children could attend private school, public school, whatever. So it kind of depended on their affiliation to our district. All of that to say, I know that for whatever reasons that we didn't pursue this 2.5, 3 years ago, I know that the changes in Title IX have driven this, or have driven a lot of, they've really raised the awareness that we as a district have a responsibility to make sure that our kids receive equity, and that the laws have changed, and support from booster groups is now considered part of that equity. And so there's been a change. That wasn't always the case. But I would tell you that this has been a conversation for a while. I've been a treasurer of many, many, many community organizations, many different umbrellas. Little League, Cub Scouts, my daughter's private school many years ago. So I have actually a personal understanding of the different ways in which organizations can be set up and run their finances. And there's no one right or wrong way, but having a good understanding of consistent expectations is helpful. So I have long advocated, Ken knows this, it's a conversation he and I had when he came on board, that having consistent expectations for how any group that affiliates with our district, just expectations and best practices, and what can our district do to support these volunteers. So, for instance, it would be good. So, but I will also say this, and then I'm going to cut this. This conversation for me has been 3 years coming, and I've held my tongue. So this is my one chance, and this is going to be it. I've long felt that our district, could provide some, and I think we've done it at different points, really just good guidelines of best practices that would support our booster clubs. And then also, but I think that it's intimidating to the booster clubs, and as a person who now sits on this side of the table and votes on a budget, I don't want any of our booster clubs to feel like, wow, if they, have to report all this, are we gonna cut their funding to their teams? And I think I'm just gonna put that on the table. I think that could be I think that's a concern that there might be, if there are booster clubs who are concerned that if this district knows exactly how much they're raising and volunteering, are we gonna cut the money to a team? And I just wanna be really clear that I don't believe that should be the purpose of this work. That this work should be about, let's put in place best practices for our booster clubs so all the volunteers understand what's really probably a pretty good basic way to run a volunteer organization that's handling money. Let's be clear on what our district needs from these groups so that we can be in compliance with federal law. And what can we do as a district to support our parents who support our kids? And that it shouldn't be, you will not find this girl using this as a venue to cut money from a team. In fact, I'm a person who thinks club teams should be getting the same kind of parity as varsity teams. I've said that for years. So this, this may cost us some money, and I would actually be okay with that if at the end of the game, at the end of the day, we have parity between our sports, our extracurriculars, our curriculars, and I'm really glad, Dan, thank you so much, and Mike, I know you guys have done a lot of the frontline work. Let's really hear what the concerns about the booster clubs are, so that we, if they have them or questions, so that we can make sure we're supporting the parents who support our kids. The only question I have is, do we only have booster clubs at the high school, or are they at the middle school or elementary schools?
My understanding is they're only at the high school. There wasn't anything of a booster club at the middle school level.
Okay, so that's my spiel. I look forward to this policy being something that ultimately is just about supporting best practices.
Great, thank you, Susan. Andrew, do you have anything to add?
Well, seeing that we've had a busy evening, and I'm fairly new to this issue, I'm taking a lot in, but I'm receptive to the idea that there should be transparency. I'm very receptive to the idea that you just mentioned, Susan, which is that along the lines of transparency, or hopefully a group wouldn't think, well, if we disclose the money that we are able to raise for our interests, that would affect how we interface with the district. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Babson? Joanna, do you have anything to contribute? No? Mrs. McMenamin? Plenty of time. Okay. Mr. Madden?
Joanna might want to share some things about her sixth-grade teacher today, but no. All right, then never mind. Oh, we'll hold later. We'll talk later. All right.
You're on, Chuck.
I'm on?
Now you're on.
I think that one of the main concerns that I do have is that booster clubs will feel the treatment that they're receiving is not warranted because they've been supporting for many years. I remember the first year Radnor football booster team started, booster club started, was 1970 was the first event that they held at the Radnor High School. Mr. DeRicco, Charles DeRicco Sr. was the founder of that time. But I think that we just need to clear up what's happening. Now, for instance, I saw that there's a liaison from the district for each booster club, or is that something that we're proposing?
Thinking about.
When you say liaison from the district,
It says
liaison to the district from the booster club. It's not an administrator, it's a person
So
from the booster club.
Is there anything like that exists now? Is there?
That is correct. So the booster club presidents work with both the coach for the activity and Mr. Friel, and so he serves as the liaison for the athletic clubs. The non-athletic clubs typically deal with the sponsor, and then if they would need any assistance, they would come to me.
Okay, so that piece is already established. So there is guidance being given to the booster clubs by district at this point.
That is correct.
That is correct. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that the guidance that they will be receiving will be in accordance to Title IX or whatever we're doing, so that they're all, in a sense, treated the same. But are they the same?
No, they're all very different. That's one of the things that's, you know, I think that the policy's trying to do, and I would echo Mr.'s comments about, you know, supporting the booster clubs by providing best practices. You know, I had the unique perspective of being an athlete who benefited from a booster club when I was in high school. I'm a parent of 4 kids who are currently athletes, and my kids are the beneficiaries of booster clubs. I've supported them. You know, we've got the mom sale that goes on every year. We've got a whole bunch of different things, and you get hit up. So if you walk through the building and someone's trying to sell you a T-shirt or something, but also as a coach. So I was a head high school coach for a number of years, and I was a coach at the college level. And you know, I can say that, you know, we have a number of booster clubs here that are represented, and they're volunteers. It's you know, and they put in a ton of time. And as a former coach, you know, the support of a booster club is vital to ensuring that students have positive outcomes. So, you know, I really appreciate the board taking the time to look through this and slowing down the policy and answering the why before we actually get into the how or the what.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
This is big, isn't it?
Yay.
I'm gonna piggyback off of that. I played sports here in Radnor. I coached here in Radnor, and same thing. The booster clubs were huge at both ends. You know, as the athlete on a team, they provided us with our snacks for a game, our water for a game, things that we would need to get through the games. We always had our end of the year stuff. We did take the time to try to have fundraisers, and as a coach, so vital in just making all that stuff happen. So the 1 or 2 individuals that are coaching don't have to worry about that. So I just wanted to make sure that we put that out there, and that all the kids, however much money parents donate or whatnot, we also have to take into consideration the fact there are some kids that might not be able to give that amount, so that there's some equity in how those kids get covered. But it's pretty vital and appreciated.
Great, thank you. Joanna, you have any second thoughts or no? 6th grade teacher conversation? 6th period teacher. So I'd like, oh, you do have something else?
Interesting class, it was fun.
Oh, no.
You were very quiet, I feel like. It was mostly just like routine.
I already gave a good write-up to your teacher. Oh, I gave a write-up to the teacher already about the class. It was a little out of control, Mr. Bechtel. We're gonna have to talk in the morning. They were excellent.
Great, thank you. Inside story, I guess. Anyway, is there anything that perhaps our solicitor or Michelle or Dan or Ken would like to add to this conversation? Again, the emphasis in this conversation is the why. Why is the district pursuing, creating such a policy? And I hope that tonight we can leave here with, if not all the questions answered, a little bit more movement in the direction of why before you go to the how. And I think what the presentation drove home for the most part is this umbrella regulation of Title IX that is basically designed to ensure that there is equity across the educational spectrum. And I'll let the administrators and our lawyers speak to this, but clearly anybody in that universe has to be as protected as possible from any claim by the Office of Civil Rights that might arise. And we do know that those claims have arisen for districts in the past, if not presently.
That's right. There have been a number of local districts that have been audited for Title IX compliance, and some have had consent decrees or arrangements entered into with the Office of Civil Rights because they've been found to be deficient. And the main issue here with Title IX that everybody has to remember is that not knowing what the booster clubs contribute doesn't protect anybody. the amount of money that gets contributed to activities gets imputed to the district, whether you know what it is or not. So when they come in to do a Title IX audit, what they're gonna do is they're gonna look and see what are the actual benefits that various organizations are getting from the, both the district and the booster clubs. And if they find that there's a disparity in the benefits that are being provided to one gender versus another, they're gonna find that the district is responsible for that, because it's the district's obligation to make sure that the benefits are equalized. It doesn't have to be exactly equal, it just has to be proportionally equalized between the various activities that different genders participate in. And so as a result, if the district is unaware of how much benefit a particular booster club is giving an activity, that really puts us in a difficult position, because we can't then equalize the benefit because we don't know what the benefit is. And so a large part of this is to make sure that there is a method by which the information about the benefit that's being provided to these teams is transmitted to the district, so that then the district is in a position to make sure that it stays compliant with Title IX once it understands what the benefit is that each organization or activity is getting. And part of that is making sure that there is a structure where everything is properly accounted for and everything is set up in a way that's legally compliant, so that each one of these entities is properly established, that they have proper leadership, that the funds that are being collected and distributed are properly being accounted for, so that they can be properly reported to the district, and then the district is in a position to act on that information and ensure compliance with the law. So really this, a large part of this activity is designed to make sure that the district is in a position to know information which, as of right now, it's going to already be responsible for knowing, even though there's no mechanism in place to collect it or get it.
And I think that this slide, it's good that this slide is up, because I think when you look at safeguards, some of the things that are under the heading of safeguards are things that may have appeared in the draft of the policy that booster clubs have seen. And yet, this slide, I guess, illustrates why those things were in there, because they lead to measures that would protect the district. And even for things such as minutes, which there's a wide definition and a very flexible definition of minutes. It can be as simple as an email to somebody, we voted to approve, and I'm looking at the solicitor to make sure, because I am not a lawyer, that I'm not speaking out of turn here, excuse me, but minutes could be a note that says, we approved the purchase of X on May 14th, 2016. And that's a minute, it creates that record, which then, if the district were to be audited, it would have a record of what actually happened. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but again, these things can look very imposing and literal, but there's a tremendous amount of flexibility in what those actually are. Am I representing that accurately?
Absolutely. And everything that Mike has shared with us here, and we as a district, the reality is that when things do go wrong with situations too, we're also responsible, whether it is something that pertains to Title IX or if there's other challenges. So we do need to partner, but it's also about protecting our boosters. I know as a parent with students involved in high school athletics, there have been years where, a particular booster club has felt like they needed some guidance on, wow, this group of parents really wants to buy these type of trophies at the end, and they often are looking for guidance, and sometimes they would come to me, Ken, you're in education, is this right that we're doing this type or this type of activity? I think there are times they need guidance, and they want that guidance for their own protection as well. So it's as much about that as well, that we want to try to give that protection and guidance to our booster clubs, and that we have that communication and partnership with them. Yes, there's the regulations that we have to make sure we follow, and we have to make sure that we are aware of all that's going on. But I think that it would be helpful to have some understanding too of what is going on when we're looking at our end of year. There has to be, parents need to know when they're giving towards their booster clubs, what is that being used for, and what is the best practice that we can help share with everyone so that can be communicated. And I know as a parent as well who gets involved with these things, and my wife sends me to too many meetings often, but we don't want to create something that's onerous as well, because everybody's volunteering their time. So we want to try to make sure we're doing something that is supportive of the volunteers, but also representing what we as a district need to do as well.
And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I think my recollection is accurate in that, for example, Ms. Deco said, because she's the business administrator, if there are things tied to financials that seem overwhelming for a particular booster club, she would be happy to guide. Stop me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I could have sworn I heard this, that she would be happy to guide anyone who feels like this seems overwhelming. I mean, this is not a road, if this is what we go down, that we would want anybody to feel like they have to go down alone. That's the whole purpose of having somebody who's a liaison to the district, because there are all kinds of resources here in the district that have offered to extend themselves to help anybody, whether you're a booster club of 5 people or 50 people, to make sure that this isn't onerous and burdensome and intimidating and all of that. Am I accurate in that?
Yeah, because I love to volunteer other people's time, so I will, Michelle has very graciously, and she has done that, she has offered that and would continue to do that. And let me put on the table too, a challenge here for all of us as well as we move forward. This is one piece, looking at developing this policy. I think we as a district are going to have some discussions down the road about what is our structure for our athletic sports, our club sports, what is it how we support those club sports, how that some of our, and not only just our club sports, any other activities, and it is different from, in the last 10 years I've been here, I've realized it's different for, it was from an earlier meeting, a joke, but it is different across the board, and for all good reasons, as things have evolved over the years. But we may want to, in the next year or so, once we have a policy in place, take some time to look at it, just reaffirm that we're comfortable with the structure that's in place, or we need to reevaluate that structure as we look at that. And I know just me mentioning that makes people nervous. Again, people start to think, oh gosh, is the district trying to take money away? No, it's I've had booster club leadership, especially clubs, come to me and say, hey, why is it we're funded at this level and this other group is funded at this other level? And in digging back, a lot of it had to do with the history and when it was developed. That's a separate topic, and we're not at that topic right now.
We are not at that topic.
I think we have to be careful which things we commingle. It doesn't mean that it's something we shouldn't be addressing, but let's go with baby steps, one step at a time, and then identify what's our next step after this.
Yeah, no, I don't take my comments early I understand, I very much think that's the case. But it's also a question that's come up over the last 2 years in almost every meeting that I've had in either finance or policy. We have members of the public who have asked about what is that consistent approach. So I think that that's another step that's coming along. Yeah. We'll get to it in your second 10 years here. Yeah. Year 2. But no, exactly that. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Title IX is very confusing.
You turn the mic
off. You just turned it off.
Well, I should have actually. Okay. Title IX is very confusing. Okay, we have booster clubs that have many different purposes. That the funding's different. Some could be for morale. Some could be this. Some could be that. Okay. So it would be beneficial for me to try to understand some kind of a violation that a booster club could do that would be a violation of Title IX. You know what I mean? What is it? That might be helpful for me.
Yeah, sure. So if, the sport that most typically gets flagged is football, boys football. So you have a booster club that provides a brand new scoreboard and fantastic facilities for the boys football team. And then you have the girls lacrosse team that gets absolutely nothing. Their booster club provides maybe, snacks, and that's it. No equipment, no new facilities, no anything else. So the Office of Civil Rights comes in and does an audit, and they say, well, wait a minute, the benefit that the boy students in your school district are receiving through participation in this sport is huge. They have this fantastic facility. They have great scoreboard, they have a fantastic stadium that they're playing in, but the girl teams, on the other hand, don't have any of these benefits. You, school district, are responsible to equalize these things. It may be that the school district didn't pay for any of the stuff that the football has. Every single thing there was paid for by Booster Club. It doesn't make any difference. The school district's still on the hook, because everything that the Booster Club did will be imputed to the school district, and it'll be up to the school district to equalize it. That's what the Title IX law, how it applies to boosters, and that's why it's important for the district to know what benefits are being provided, because if you don't know, you can't equalize.
But how can you remedy that? How can you equalize when the costs of the different sports are so much different, the facilities are so much different?
It doesn't have to be exactly equal. You just have to, on a proportionate basis. So there could be a lot more boys that play football, for example, than girls lacrosse. But you would just have to look and say, on a roughly proportionate basis, how can you provide an equally beneficial experience to the girl lacrosse players and the football players again? And that may involve some expenditure by the district. Maybe the districts would have to look at this and say, okay, we need to invest in an upgrade of some facilities for the lacrosse, or we need to invest in new equipment or new uniforms or something of that nature. But that's how the equalization has to happen.
So if we as a district saw, for instance, a booster club, we'll put the football booster club and they are donating some money towards new scoreboard, we'll say. Okay? And then, in order for us to balance this out, we may say we need to invest something in some of the other sports. For instance, we may want to put a all-weather track in. Okay, well, not an all-weather track, but both boys and girls use that. For football and the lacrosse field, we may want to have an all-purpose. For instance, if the lacrosse, girls lacrosse played on grass and the boys played on the all-purpose, that I can kind of understand as a violation.
Right.
I'm just having trouble with how are we going to really approach this? Well, how are we going to measure
And the first step to approaching it is knowing what it is.
Knowing the contributions of what it is.
If you don't know what it is, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to approach it.
So if we see it's lopsided because, for instance, the football team, like I said, the Football Booster Club was established in 1970. It's been around for quite a few years. It may have an intense group of people running it who are very effective. So how does that play into the needs and the benefits? In other words, each of these booster clubs are made up of individuals. Some may be the same on all the other ones.
And I'll tell you what the Department of Education would say to that. The Department of Education would say, what you're describing is the historical discrimination that females have always experienced in sports being carried forward into the future by looking at and saying that because these groups were so well established so long ago, they have such a big alumni network, there's so many people in the community that support them. By using that as a way to justify an unequal distribution of resources, you're just perpetuating the discrimination from the past and bringing it into the future. That's exactly what they would say.
Well, that's very helpful to me.
So can I just clarify something, because Chuck, you said something interesting. I wouldn't have actually said that the booster club is violating anything. Booster clubs are just doing their thing, and I'm gonna say boys and girls rugby, because we don't have a girls and boys rugby team right here. Do we?
I don't know. We do not.
Thank you. So I'm gonna use a team that doesn't exist at our school. Chuck, to your point, if the boys rugby team, if the rugby booster parents for the boys is contributing significantly more to the benefit of the boys, they're not doing it, they're not in violation. The booster clubs. The district is in violation, and the district needs we need to remedy that through district funds, because we can't make the girls rugby team booster club give us a whole lot more money, and
can't refuse the other club.
Correct, and we can't refuse. We can't refuse it. So that is the reason it's so critically important that the district know how much the girls rugby team and how much the boys rugby team is giving us. It's also important that we know how much the teams that have boys and girls together are contributing, because that helps offset this, right, Mike? You know, you can use the offset of a team that is boys and girls to level that. It's not one team versus another, it's overall the activities
Overall
that
experience.
girls and overall the boys. So actually the information from our co-ed teams is just as critically important. In any event, not to pick on our rugby teams, but you know, that's, they are not, the booster clubs are not in violation.
Right.
So I don't want booster clubs to feel bad, they're just out there supporting our kids.
Yeah,
It's our job to make sure that there is no violation, and if there is, and by the way, a boys rugby team would have no way necessarily of knowing what the girls rugby team boosters are doing, so how can they possibly be in violation? That's why we have the central dissemination of information and you know, evaluation of that, to then have to, you know, figure out if we need to make some adjustments.
That's right.
Right, okay.
And we have an opportunity to go about this in a collaborative way.
Correct.
To move forward as a district. It's a lot different when you're, you know, having the Office of Civil Rights or some other situation, you're having to make change. We have an opportunity to look to understand what it is, and then to develop and figure out what is best for Radnor as we move forward, and what are the steps we need to take as we move forward.
Right.
Terrific. So if there are no other comments from the committee, I'd just like to ask if the administrators have anything else they'd like to contribute before we turn to public comment, which I'm really hopeful that even if you don't know what you want to say or you need time to process it, you will continue to engage with us, because it was your input that got us to this stage of development, and we hope that you'll continue to give us feedback and input and work with us along the way so that we can do something that is going to be as collaborative as possible for this community. So if there isn't anything further from the administrators, then I'd like to thank them very much for all of their hard work up until right before this meeting to get this information session together, and ask if there's any new business from anybody on this committee, and if not, then move into our closing public comments. Would anybody like to come up and share their thoughts with us? Just make sure you've signed in over there, and when you come up, just announce your name and address, please. Thanks.
I'm Mary Sotheby.
You can turn on the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Mary Sotheby, 704 Woodcrest Circle. I'm the president of the Squash Booster Club, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments as we look at the first drafts, and that's just reminding you that we have some booster clubs, such as ours, that are very small. We've had anywhere from, a couple of years ago, we had 28 kids out. This last year, we had 18. And let's see, my son is a senior, and so I was involved before that. But I mean, at the middle school, before we actually had a booster club. And what I've seen is the program has grown, but we don't have a lot of parents who really understand squash. And so they tend to be more hesitant on jumping in at sort of a booster club level. If we ask them to do things, they'll bring treats or whatever. So my request is what Mr. Batchelor said about being onerous is, since we're so small, and as I would compare us, say we're not the band booster club, there's not as many of us, and so just if there could be an awareness that if there are too many rules or too many officers required or whatever, that becomes a little bit difficult for a club like ours. And then the second thing would be, just as we're all good and all that with making sure that everything is very transparent, but as we look at the funds that would go for, some of your comments on the funds were of interest to me, because if I think of, say, a band booster club, which both of my sons are in band, their uniforms and everything are provided. And as a squash club, we have the parents pay one fee, which pays for our courts and the coaching. We have one coach who is a teacher coach from Radnor, and then we also pay for coaching at Fairmont Athletic Club, and then we also pay for courts. And then we have a separate booster club fee, and that pays for our actual tournament entries, their uniforms. So we're paying for some things in our booster club fees that I'm thinking perhaps some of the other clubs that might be more of a varsity sport, those monies would be used for, I'm not articulating this well, but most of our booster club fees are really for things that enable our kids to compete. Whereas I think in band or perhaps football, they receive their uniforms already, they have the field provided, they have the coaching provided. So just making sure that and we're happy to break out any of that, but that might be something that you keep in mind with regard to the pure club versus the club that's part of a varsity sport.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Booster
very
of a
much.
So you're saying booster of a club sport versus booster of a varsity sport?
Yes.
Or-
Got it.
Yes.
The
I'll make it better.
distinction.
Well, the distinction is actually, I think it's a booster of a club sport
Yeah.
versus the booster of a PIAA sanctioned sport.
Got
So
it.
Our PIAA sanctioned sports are different than our club sports.
Got it.
And then also of a club sport which requires so much of an outside expense. For instance, we have to pay
Squash
for
courts.
Fairmont squash courts, and we have to, as opposed to if we needed a running bib or something.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Super helpful.
Hello, Mr. Sherry.
Hello. First of all,
what's your
Steve
name?
Sherry, 9 Grant Lane. I'm the president of Baseball Booster Club. I'm also the president of the Ice Hockey Club. So I deal with a lot of money. I understand fully where the solicitor is coming from. Both of our clubs, I can tell you, we comply with everything that's up on the board. Okay, so there's no issue with it. We hold annual meetings, we disclose statements, everybody knows where our stuff goes. So with that being said, my next thing I'll say is thank you to everybody, because first of all, when Mike Friel called me, and I obviously do a lot of high school, and said that there's a new policy coming out, and here it is, which was your guys' first draft. I read it, all 3 documents, highlighted it, and was prepared to come in with fire and salt, but it snowed that day. So, so you were off the hook. But luckily, some of my other presidents steered you in the right direction, because that's the first thing I will say as a Booster Club president. Many of you know I've been involved in youth sports fundraising for a long time here in Radnor. Where you were heading was definitely the wrong direction. And let me be clear on that, because we raise money, we give it back, and the reason that we raise the money is because we are filling the gaps that the school district can't fill. That's the bottom line. So if everybody with your policies and the way you're looking to go, just remember, if all of the volunteers walk away, you have a shortcoming. And then you have a choice to make between the shortcoming and the kids. And that's what we, the boosters, fill and have been and gladly fill. So I applaud where we are tonight, where we're kind of having a little bit more reasonable approach, solicit our input. I know there's numerous booster presidents in the room. We do spend a lot of time running 2 clubs. I can tell you I spend an awful lot of time. And there are hockey, we can go in, I would argue that hockey's not a booster club in the sense that we are a varsity sport, club sport with extreme expenses. There's not a club sport out there. Our hockey budget is $65,000. Ice, every time our kids touch the ice, it's $500. So we raise, and it's a lot of money out of the parents. So I'm familiar with all sides of this. So where we're at, I'm glad we're kind of heading in I'll say a calmer direction, because as I told Mike Friel at the very beginning, it was a non-starter. I met with Mike. Some of what you adopted is what Mike and I spent 2 hours in his office talking about, that it needs to be capped at the high school level by the administrator. Principal Bechtel is a great guy who can oversee this and keep it simple.
Yep, got it.
Thank you, Mr. Sherry, appreciate it. Hopefully
Sure, yeah,
we'll
thank you.
hear even more. Mr. Cohen? Good evening.
Hey, I'm Gary Cohen, 780 Pine Hill Road. So I want to echo some of the things that Steve said. I'm president of the Football Boosters Club, also an officer in the baseball club, and I can tell you that most nights I'm doing something. It's for a very worthy cause, but it's also a lot of time. It's not something, I would rather not have to do it, but it's for the kids. You know, first of all, I do want to thank everybody because I think this has been a great conversation. We all want the same thing. We all are looking out for the kids and what's the right thing to do for the kids, and that's why we're all involved here. Number two, I think giving guidance and best practices and sharing information among the clubs and between the board, once again, a great thing to do. Like Steve said, we probably do 98% of the things, but even for the other 2%, it's great to know, and you know, we definitely follow up on that. Yeah, volunteers. It's really hard to get volunteers, and I can tell you that I'm in the position that I'm in today with the football club, not because I stepped two steps forward, it's because everybody else stepped 2 steps back. Yeah, exactly. And so we just have to be careful about the burdens that we impose, because if we can't get volunteers, then we can't support the kids and the different teams. And you know, I don't have the exact figures of the school board funding, you know, for the different sports, but I know that the things that the football club contributes and the baseball club contributes are things like equipment, right? Helmets and baseballs and game film for football, which is a requirement in Central League, and you know, to exchange game films, right? These are things that if we didn't provide them, the school district would. Just, yeah, I think it's a great idea. Hopefully we can continue the dialogue, but we just have to be careful, because if we make it too hard, then people are just going to drop out,
Sure.
and the kids will suffer.
Yep. Thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you so much. Is there any more input from the public? No, nobody? Oh, here comes somebody.
I'll sign my name in a second, before after I put my thoughts.
Welcome.
Thank you. Emily Renfrey, Bryn Mawr. Currently, I'm the president of the high school softball booster club, and I'm also I don't really know how to describe myself as the high school volleyball ex-treasurer, but no one has wanted my job, so I'm stuck with it for a while.
Yes, you are.
But I'm still actively looking for a replacement, and I think that is something that I request that you take into account, is the somewhat onerous job of being a volunteer here at Radnor. And I think that Susan spoke to that, and I understand the much of the tone that I've heard tonight is that you are very appreciative of what the parents do, but I'm concerned when I look through the 3 documents that were sent through Mike Friel, through the high school booster email, that they do impose a lot of regulations, and while they're drafts, I'm concerned that the amount of guidance that you're seeking to provide for the booster clubs will become something that really does stifle any desire of parents to step up. Our budgets on both sports are very small, so I'm not trying to say that if you have a small budget, it shouldn't apply to you, but I think that you know, our bookkeeping is a lot different than, say, football, ice hockey, all that sort of stuff. I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed and examined, and it's probably not something that could be done with the proposed timeline that you have, because that's a lot of information gathering that needs to be done at a very busy time of year, at the end of the year, with all the kids studying for finals and all that sort of stuff, and we're wrapping up playoffs and senior night and all that sort of constraints on our time. I wonder if we could actually get all that information gathered for you, and whether you could gather that from us as well. My thoughts are somewhat disjointed, but I wanted to address, I think, there was a comment that there are no booster clubs at the middle school level, and that is true. As far as I'm aware, I have 3 kids. I have a senior, sophomore, and a 7th grader. I have not seen any booster clubs, but I suggest to you that they are required and much needed at the middle school level, because I think the athletic program at the middle school level leaves a lot to be desired. It seems very disorganized, whether buses are not there. The baseball team now for 2 years have been waiting for their baseball uniforms. Most of the pants for the boys baseball team have holes in them. It's kind of embarrassing. We've never gotten the hats in the 2 years that they've been promised. I'm not saying we're trying to make the district incur expense for these uniforms, but if that's what the district says it's providing, the kids aren't getting it, so there might be a disconnect there that needs to be addressed. I think that's something maybe the Booster Club, if it's formed, could help out with. I'm sure, you know, that could be created for each team, and they'd be happy to say, get uniforms or finance or, you know, organize a pizza party, something like that. I think it's something that's worth investigating, whether that's something that should be addressed. Basketball, softball, and soccer. And I think that covers all the sports that my kids played. To address the financial aid for those who cannot contribute to the booster dues, at least for the sports that I've always been involved in, when we pay booster dues, that goes to cover banquet, some team building activities, some equipment, some extra coaching, spearwear for the kids. The kids who cannot, or the families that cannot afford the booster dues, have always been given what we consider financial aid or scholarship, to give it a more euphemistic term. Those children, as long as the families indicate that they are not able to pay their dues, that's fine, that's great. They get every benefit that everyone else gets, whether or not the dues have been paid. So they're never singled out. I know that that information is kept in the strict because it is such a sensitive issue, and I've never heard throughout my years of that confidence being betrayed, but it is addressed on many levels for all the booster clubs. I do have a question, something to think about that I've not seen addressed in the materials that have been provided, is when we talk about equity under Title IX, and I think the example was if the scoreboard is donated to the lacrosse team, and say softball wants a scoreboard as well, whether it's either donated from a booster club or the school district, what the time frame is to examine that equity. So if in 2018 the new scoreboard's installed, when is the time frame that it needs to be installed for softball? And maybe that's fluid, but I think that's something that needs to be investigated, addressed, so that if you're looking at the equity and the parity, what snapshot do we need to look at?
Sure.
As far as booster clubs being joint, I'm not aware of any sports that have both the boys and the girls paid for together. Boys and girls track may or may not be, I'm not quite sure about them, or some of the other sports that I'm not privy to, but for instance, baseball is very separate from softball. They seem like similar sports, but they're really not, and I think it's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. I also have one last comment about the documents that were proposed. I noticed that things such as banquet dates, programs, and other what I would consider very minute and small issues are something that will need to be reviewed by either district personnel or school board personnel. I thought that was just details that I'm not quite sure why that needs to be examined on a case-by-case basis for each booster club. If we want to have a banquet, I think the exact example was banquet dates have to be approved. If we want to have a banquet on May 20th, I'm not sure why we have to come to the school board or the district to get approval for that. And it just seemed a little bit too intrusive and unwieldy. I mean, who's going to be that person that we need to go to? It just didn't really I was curious as to why that was included. And that also goes to, I recall seeing a line item on programs, that if we hand out programs at a sporting event, those would need to be approved as well. So that, for instance, on Thursday night, we have the softball senior night, and we have a program that has congratulations seniors. It says what the girls' favorite memory of school sports is, what their favorite Little League memory was, what their words of advice to the players that they're leaving behind are, what their plans for the future are. Very, innocuous information, whatever. And then it basically thanks the coaches. I'm not quite sure why that is something that would need to be included in a policy review from either the board or a district personnel. I think that covers most of my remarks, but I also would request that I saw the time frame, and I'm not sure if, because you're still considering the why are we here as opposed to the how are we going to accomplish our goals, I'm not sure if that's a realistic time frame, and I respectfully request that that this whole approval process be extended by at least 60 days so that more booster club people can make their opinions, comments, and suggestions known as well to all of you and to the clubs themselves.
I just want to respond to that and say that you can help us. Please tell your fellow booster folks about this meeting. It's being recorded, and if you can help us get the word out that it would be instructive, if you feel that it is, for them to watch this, that would be really helpful. And we encourage you to join with us at our June 19th meeting as we continue this conversation. In terms of timelines, we have already changed the timeline two times, so it is flexible. And we're doing it at a pace to try to ensure maximum engagement with those people who would be impacted by this. So there is flexibility, but I would put out the ask that you please continue to encourage your colleagues who are involved in the booster community to watch this video and to engage with us as we go through the process. And I hope you all consider coming back to our next policy committee meeting, which is on June 19th at 6:30.
We'll also put the PowerPoint up on the Booster Club development policy.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment this evening?
This is very brief. Just listening to the different parents tonight, it occurred to me that club sports don't appear on that athletics disclosure form for Title IX. And I believe Ms. Stern actually echoes a feeling that I have, which is, when can a club sport be funded like a varsity sport? Why do they have to be PIAA sports to be funded? Really funded by the district significantly. I mean, in 2003, I think ice hockey was voted by the board as a varsity sport, and yet it's still referred
Always
to.
considered it a varsity sport.
Yeah, it's still referred to as a club sport, and the amount of funding for an incredibly expensive sport is minimal. It's like, I don't know, I'm gonna pull 8,000 out of the sky there, but that's also true of boys' crew. How long does a sport have to exist and be really, have strong participation from our students before we look at it and say we're not funding it the way we're funding other sports? Why is that? That was clear to me tonight anyway. And those are my comments, and I would like the board to think about that when you're thinking about boosters, because are we expecting too much of parents of certain sports? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
I just have, are you public commenting too?
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead. Okay, really quick, okay. I'd just like to give a plug to Sam Miller, the father of Radnor ice hockey. His memory is enshrined in ice hockey at Radnor. That's all.
That's important.
It was.
listening to the requirements that are being, the reason for this policy, if we're talking about parity or equity or whatever, are we talking, now I'm hearing terms club sports, varsity sports, are we talking equity, like if the example that was used, the big scoreboard for the football team, but the girls lacrosse team doesn't have that, if that's a varsity sport, which I'm sure that, then the school district has to pay for that, which means the taxpayer has to pay for that, where on the other side, the boosters, the supporters, the parents of those playing, they're paying for it, so that's inequitable, I would say, to taxpayers, not that they wouldn't want to be able to contribute, but it's forcing the district, whose money comes from the taxpayers, buy something that wasn't already asked for. And I also learned tonight, which is something I did not know, maybe why the football booster club is so large and the dollars that are contributed. I didn't realize they were buying the helmets, uniforms, etc. Or at least the helmets. I thought I heard that the president of the club say the helmets are part of what we contribute to kind of. And baseballs for the baseball team. That's, you know, brought to light. And also, is it possible for the public to see the draft that was given to the booster clubs? So we know what the booster club presidents have been talking about tonight. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? All right, then I want to wish everyone a nice night.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.